This is day 8 of 365, and wait, is it day 8? Now I'm second guessing myself. We're going to check this. It's going to be difficult to keep track of this because here's the fun fact: I'm actually fairly dumb. Yep, it is. This is day 8 of 365, and today I am thinking about prose. Nicole McKeon, who is this incredible content creator on TikTok, she's also a terrific author. I've only read one of her books at this point, Blood and Silver, but I really loved it, and the rest of her books are all on my TBR. But she did a post about prose that I both very, very much agreed with and also very much disagreed with. And there's a couple reasons for that. So, what she was essentially talking about is that there is no excuse for poor prose, that prose is a critical and crucial part in telling a story. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. But I've had kind of an interesting history with my feelings about my own prose. Because when I first started writing fantasy novels, I went out and I did all this research. I read all of the greats. I basically pulled one of those who were the top fantasy authors working today lists, and I just started working my way through it. And one of the things about fantasy is that there are a lot of authors that very much use that old English, I don't know, Middle Earth style. So you have Tolkien's prose, you have Patrick Rothfuss has some incredible prose, even George R. R. Martin, who tends to be a bit more approachable, I think, but even he delves into the kind of that old school storytelling kind of structure. And the fact is, I realized very, very quickly that my style of writing did not align with that at all. I came up from journalism school. That's where I got most of my training as a writer. I have a journalism degree from Middle Tennessee State University. Go Blue Raiders. And so I learned to write at the feet of journalists, these men and women who had worked in bullpens on tight deadlines, who had ink under their fingernails, and who believed in machine gun prose that was streamlined, lean, cut, and to the point. And the authors that they talked about were people like George Pelecanos, who very much took that style of journalistic writing and brought it to their books and their novels. And so I always had this idea in my head that my style of writing would work great for things like noir, things like mystery, things like true crime, stuff like that. But I also, the more I started both writing fantasy and reading fantasy, the more I began to really believe that I lacked the writing capability to be able to succeed as a fantasy author. And it wasn't until I had dinner with a good friend of mine, one of my closest friends. His name is Josh Moth. He's an English teacher. He's also one of the smartest people when it comes to story and structure that I've ever met. He has been reading and reviewing books and movies for over 20 years now, and he understands on a fundamental basis what makes story work, what makes a story not work. And he has also been one of the biggest contributors to my writing since we've met in college way back in 1998. And I went out to dinner with him, and I kind of shared this fear that I had that my writing capabilities, they really limited me when it came to writing fantasy. He considered that, and he nodded and he said, okay, you know what, he goes, I want you to try a book that I know you haven't read yet. And he sent me to go get The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. And so I picked it up and I read it, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. This was a book that was unlike any other fantasy that I read. The prose was lean and it was vicious. The dialogue was sharp. It like everything seems to come from behind gritted teeth. Everything in that book lined up so much closer to the type of writing that I had been trained in. And yet, at the end of that book, no one can argue that the prose in that book is not absolutely gorgeous. And after I read it, Josh and I went out for dinner again. And the thing he told me, he said, you got to understand that the things that you're worried about, your journalism training, your style of writing, your very lean, plot focused, world building style of writing, that is not a bug, that's a feature. That's going to make you stand out from a lot of the other fantasy authors. And I am now, let's see, I've written 5 books in this series. 5 books in, and one of the things I'm learning is the feedback I get from people who like my books, the feedback from people who really, really do love them, they all reference those exact same things. They all talk about my prose being very lean and clean, my books moving at a great clip, that my books being stripped down and very focused. And at no point have I ever had someone leave a review for my book that said, I would have enjoyed this if the prose was more fantasy like. And I think that what that really does go to prove is that there's no such thing as fantasy prose. There are 1,000 different examples and 1,000 different styles out there, each one of which takes a different approach to this. And if you're starting to write your story and you are starting to freak out about your prose, you're starting to worry that it's not flowery enough, it's not lyrical enough, it's not complex enough, it's not rich enough, the thing that I would then tell you is you have to keep writing, because the first few times you write, you're going to basically mimic other authors that you've seen. 72 Hours is a blatant Dennis Lehane ripoff. I'll admit that all day long. But the more you write, the more you start settling into your own rhythm, and everything feeds into that. The experiences you've had, the language you studied growing up, the dialect, the part of the country you're from, the stories you were told by your parents and your grandparents and your uncles, and the TV you watched as a kid, the media that you fell in love with, the stories that you became passionate about, the art that you became obsessed with, the books that you read, like every single thing, all pours into you, and what comes out is your style and your prose. And there's an entire field of forensics that analyzes writing and can identify the person that did it. And the fact that that exists means that our writing, our prose, is as unique as a fingerprint. And if you are honest and intentional about wanting to bring all of the focus to every single sentence you write, to making everything you write passionate and honest and real, and you actually take the time to do more than just read off this happened and this happened and this happened, your prose will emerge from that, and you will find what your style is. And it may not be what you expect it to be. It may not even be what you want to be. You may have this dream of being the next Tolkien, but find out that your prose is just not that. Be okay with that and embrace what your style is. And then you could start figuring out ways to tell stories with that style that nobody else can duplicate. And that's one of the coolest things out there, I think. So, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap today up. So I will see all of y'all tomorrow.